A sitting United States congressman went on national television last week, and this is what he said.
I've been briefed by just about every alphabet agency there is. And I'll just tell you this, if they would release the things that I've seen, you would stay up, you'd be up at night worrying about or thinking about this stuff.
That's Representative Tim Burchett from Tennessee. He's a member of the House Task Force on the Declassification of Federal Secrets on Newsmax, April 1st, 2026. But he wasn't done.
A brief last week on an issue, or excuse me, 2 weeks ago, and it would have set the earth on this country would have come unglued, I think, if they would have heard all that I heard. They would demand answers.
5 days after that interview, Burchett introduced a bill in Congress to permanently disband and destroy the only government office investigating UAPs. Now, that's not a coincidence. That's a data point. Let's build the case, shall we? This is Beyond the Map. To understand what Burchett just did, you need to understand what he's trying to kill and why it was built in the first place. AARO, the All-domain Anomaly Resolution Office. It was stood up by the Pentagon in July of 2022 under the National Defense Authorization Act. Its mandate was straightforward: centralize all UAP investigations across the military and intelligence community. One office, one chain of command, and congressional reporting obligations built in by law. On paper, it looked like progress. After decades of fragmented programs, ATIP and the UAP Task Force, Congress finally created a permanent funded, accountable office to answer the question to the American public who've been asking now for 70 years. By early 2026, AARO had accumulated over 2,000 UAP cases. That's over 2,000 cases. The office had grown by at least 400 cases since its last public update in 2024. Congressional mandates to report, statutory obligations to publish. Now hold that number, because here's what actually happened. In law enforcement, we have a term for a witness who goes quiet right when the pressure is the highest. We don't call that innocent. We call that a pattern. AARO has gone quiet, not slightly quiet, but completely dark. The office has not published its 2025 annual report, which is required by law. It's not released a second volume of its congressionally mandated historical record on government UAP involvement, also required by law. When Defense Scoop asked the Pentagon why AARO had not briefed reporters or released any unclassified findings in over a year, the official response: 7 words. We have nothing to announce at this time. 2,000 cases, statutory reporting obligations, and 7 words? We have nothing to announce at this time? But the silence isn't the only data point. There's also what happened when Congress tried to get answers directly. In April 2024, Representative Paulina Luna, who chairs the House Task Force on the Declassification of Federal Secrets, walked out of a classified AARO briefing. On camera, she called it, and I'm going to quote her directly, a nothing burger. A sitting congresswoman with classified clearance who chairs the Declassification Task Force walked out of the AARO briefing and told the cameras it was empty. And then there's what AARO did behind closed doors that almost nobody reported at that time. In 2023, the Senate passed the UAP Disclosure Act, bipartisan legislation that would have created an independent review board with real authority to declassify UAP records and, critically, eminent domain powers to recover UAP-related materials from private contractors. Now, AARO lobbied to gut the bill. The office argued the review board duplicated its mandate. It convinced Congress to strip the board entirely, leaving only a weakened record collection at the National Archives with no enforcement teeth. Now, here's what makes that significant. While AARO was publicly arguing that there's no need for an eminent domain authority because no such material existed, the Pentagon's own rewrite of the legislation quietly preserved the eminent domain powers. Redirected to AARO itself, the office argued the authority wasn't needed. Then it kept the authority for itself. In a criminal investigation, we don't call that a contradiction. We call that a motive. On April the 6th, 2026, Congressman Tim Burchett introduced House Resolution 8197. The bill does three things. First, it orders the Secretary of War, that's Pete Hegseth, under the Trump administration's renaming of the Pentagon, to terminate AARO within 60 days. Second, it redistributes the AARO functions across the other elements of the Defense Department. Third, and this is the clause that really matters the most, it includes a hard prohibition. Neither the Secretary of War nor the Director of National Intelligence can create any new centralized office to replace AARO. A rebrand is specifically legally impossible. Now read that clause closely. Burchett's isn't just shutting down the office. He's closing a door and welding it shut. The question a good investigator asks here is not, well, why did he do this? The question is, why that specific clause? Why does it matter to him enough to write it explicitly into the legislation that no replacement can exist? Tim Burchett sits on a task force created specifically to declassify federal secrets. He's received briefings, in his own words, from just about every alphabet agency out there. He says pretty clearly that what he's seen would keep you up at night. He says this country would come unglued, and 5 days after saying that on television, he moved to make AARO permanently, legally irreplaceable. Now, that's not a frustrated congressman venting. That's a calculated legislative act from someone who believes the office is not just broken, but it is the mechanism that's broken. Here's where the story gets specific in a way that most coverage has missed it entirely. On March 31st, 2026, 1 week before Burchett's bill, Congresswoman Luna sent a formal letter to Defense Secretary Hegseth. The letter demanded the delivery of 46 specific classified UAP video files, not general categories, 46 very specifically named files with dates, locations, and military call signs. Operational context. Files like a 4 UAP formation over Iran from August 2022, or a UAP making instant acceleration in Syrian airspace in 2021. Footage of a U.S. military missile striking a luminous orb and appearing to bounce off of it. The specificity of that list tells you something. You don't arrive with file names, call signs, and dates unless a whistleblower told you exactly what to ask for and exactly where it lives. Luna's letter set a deadline. The Pentagon had until April the 14th, 2026 to produce those 46 files. Now, at the same time those files were due, Burchett has introduced a bill to shut down the office that holds them. And Burleson, a congressman you've heard me reference many times before, the one who's been Grush's advocate on the Hill, told Fox News he already has a list of 2 to 3 dozen UAP files. He said they have people on the inside monitoring those files, watching to see if they're moved or deleted. And Burchett added something else in that same interview, unprompted. He said, for the record, he is not suicidal and he doesn't take risks. A sitting United States congressman felt the need to say that publicly on national television. We noted it in our last episode when officials refused to deny what they knew. We're noting it again now because a man who feels the need to say that is telling you something about what he believes the stakes are. Now, I'm going to apply the same standard I always apply on this channel. I'm not telling you the files are being destroyed, and I'm not telling you AARO is actively burying evidence. What I am telling you is this: when a congressional deadline for 46 classified files lands in the same week that the office holding the files is targeted for elimination, a good investigator doesn't call that a coincidence. A good investigator starts looking for the cause. Let me establish what we can actually stand on. What is documented in the congressional record, on camera, and in the public record right now. Trump directed the Pentagon on February 19th, 2026 to release the UAP files. 7 weeks have passed and no files have been released. AARO has not published legally required reports in over a year. When asked why, the Pentagon said it had nothing to announce. Burchett was briefed on a classified matter 2 weeks before he introduced his bill, described it in terms no sitting congressman uses lightly, and then moved to make AARO's centralized authority permanently illegal. Luna demanded 46 specific classified files. By April 14th, those files were identified with the specificity that only comes from inside information. Burleson says people on the inside are watching those files right now, monitoring for movement, monitoring for deletion. What do we not know? Well, we don't know what's in those files. We don't know what Burchett was briefed on, and we don't know if the April 14th deadline will be met, ignored, or maybe quietly extended. Here's what I do know. After 25 years of building cases from the public record, the pattern that we're looking at, an office that goes silent under pressure, that stripped its own oversight while preserving its own authority, that is now being legislatively dismantled by the same congressman who received classified briefings that left them shaken. That pattern has a shape. In my experience, the shape of a pattern is data. We're watching. We'll follow this April 14th deadline, and what happened, we'll report what happens or what doesn't. If you've been following this channel, you know we don't force conclusions that the evidence doesn't support. But we don't dismiss a pattern just because it can't yet explain it. Stay with us here on Beyond the Map.